position is that society is built through contribution, and so having people, compelling people in a society to contribute to that society, just follows both rightfully, ethically, and pragmatically. So, ethically, we all benefit from the contributions of society. We all use roads. We all have jobs, and the people who say that they don't want to contribute to society, or that they're independent, that they don't have any obligation to society, are usually lying. These people, they a lot of times they might have jobs that they don't want to pay taxes on, but you can't have a business if you don't have the infrastructure of society to build that business on. And you also need the protection of the government to maintain your property rights. Right? Rightfully, we have the government has a right to compel us to contribute to society because they are the authority. Any established authority in a society has every right to ask of its citizens what it will. People say that, well, no, you can't compel anyone to do anything, but that's how society works. If Nobody will disagree, if you really get down to it, that if you control an area of land, you can enforce rules of people who are in that society. And they just usually talk about, like, you're talking to an ANCAP, they might talk about like businesses doing so, but nobody really disagrees that any authority over an area has the right to compel its citizens to do what it will, right? As long as we all, as a group, are allowing that authority to exist in place. And pragmatically, well, if people are refusing to contribute to society, we are going to have a worse society. We love the things that we have in society. We love technology. We love our establishments. We love infrastructure. And if people are refusing to build those up, then we're not going to have the things that we all love. Um, One of my big criticisms of America is our independent thinking, which America can have a lot of great things. And yes, independence is important, but things like I want to only live to benefit myself is causing so many problems in America. It's causing climate change. It's causing things like, well, we have poor infrastructure because people aren't willing to fund them because they don't want to personally give their belongings to contribute to those things, and that's actually making everything worse for them. People only thinking of themselves in the long run has negative effects on everyone in society. And I see my time.
Cool. So, one of the things that you said at first was about because everyone benefits from society, everyone is ethically obligated to contribute, and who's to deny that obligation are usually lying. But like, I think that's an emotional argument a little bit. So, are you confusing benefit with consent here, and ethical disagreement with bad faith? I think that framing kind of matters. So, I would say, how are you framing this exactly? Because I feel like that's a little bit of a sidestep.
No, that's not a feelings based argument because people in society contribute to it with the intention that they will get in return the benefits of society. If someone is giving you something with the expectation that you'll return the favor, and then you refuse to do so and you leech from them, I think that is, I don't, again, that's not a feelings argument. That is ethically wrong.
But can you argue that the way that we have built society today, not everybody has contributed to it?
Um, to an extent, although I would say that 99% of people in some way contribute to society.
What about people who can't physically contribute or mentally or incapacitated for whatever reason? Like, how do you differentiate between those folks and everybody, I guess?
Um, Well, if someone is incapable of contributing to society, then I guess that is what it is. But that's an exception. Like if I said, if you live in an apartment, you should pay rent, and then someone is like, I don't know, like whatever. Like I don't think that exceptions break the rule. Like I think you can establish a rule that people should contribute to society without saying, well, what if you're in a coma? You can't contribute then. Like yeah, that's obvious, but that doesn't really break the rule.
All right. So when I originally saw this prompt, I actually was on the other side until I thought about it a little more about the keywords here. And so the question before us isn't whether contribution of society is valuable. I think it clearly is, but whether citizens are obligated and therefore should be compelled to contribute, I think is the key piece here. And I argue that they are not. obligated or compelled. I think moral
Mm.
obligation only has meaning when it's free choice, and if contribution is coerced, stops being a virtue and becomes mere compliance. You can think of slavery this way, or being forced to be deployed into the military. We don't praise someone morally for acting under threat or force, and we shouldn't pretend that forced contribution is the same as a civic responsibility. So some will argue that because citizens benefit from society, they owe it something in return, but benefit alone does not create that obligation, and none of us are explicitly consented to a social contract, and mere existence cannot reasonably be treated as a debt. Otherwise, citizenship itself becomes a form of a lifelong liability, which I think is wrong. There's also a deeper danger that when the state compels contribution, individuals tend to cease to be ends in themselves and become instruments for social output in a society that defines people by what it can extract for them is not really protecting freedom. It's basically you're just managing labor at that point. And once contribution is mandatory, someone must decide what counts. Is it paid work? Is it caregiving? Is it art? Is it dissent, political participation, whatever it may be? So the moment contribution becomes compulsory, disagreement becomes deviance, and then enforcement becomes unavoidable. And history has shown us where that leads. So, importantly, this is not an argument against responsibility. I think citizens already have negative duties to obey the law and not harm others, but positive contribution is different, and it's meaningful precisely because it's voluntary. So, strong societies do not force people to care. They create conditions where people choose to contribute through opportunity, freedom, and trust, and coercion erodes all three of those things. So, that's why I believe contribution should be encouraged and not forced or obligated.
So, do you think that there should be any such thing as a moral compulsion?
I would need an example if you have one to
Sure.
understand it a little bit.
Yeah, if you owe someone money, then do you think that you should be morally compelled to return that money?
Morally, yes, sure.
Okay, so you do believe in moral compulsions.
In that example, yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
Okay, gotcha. And then you said that I think that was my big question. Okay,
cool.
so you talk. Oh, did you want
Yeah,
to
go for it.
start?
No, no, go for it.
Okay, so you said that in a society where if people are compelled to contribute to that society, then well we see where that leads, right? But you're making assumptions that if we have some kind of compulsion to have any contribution to society, then it's necessarily going to lead to some terrible results. Like you're I think you're implying like Stalinist Russia or like Nazi Germany or like communist China, right? But again, obviously that's not always going to be the case because in America we have plenty of compulsions to contribute to society, ergo taxes, right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's things that we do as a society to make us functioning, um, but it depends on what you mean by contribution. I think that's kind of the crux of this is like what you're saying is that everybody has to contribute in what sense? Like I mentioned earlier in kind of my opening, does that mean that is art contributing? Is taking out the trash contributing to society? Like how low is the form of contribution? How high does it have to be? And I think that the problem is that the main definition of contribution could really be anything. And then if that's the case, then there are a lot of people today, like I would argue in America, that aren't contributing to society. And I think we're a lot better of a society because we have that free will than a country like even Russia today, not even Stalinist Russia, for that matter. So I think the matter of free will has made us a better country because people can figure out how to contribute to society more or less, and some people don't, and that's okay. But I think that freedom is really what drives society more than obligation to.
So you say that there's plenty of people in our country that are not contributing to society. Who would you classify under that group?
So streamers, no, I'm kidding. So I think that there are a lot of people who don't contribute to society. I mean, if you're in jail, you're not really contributing to society and you're locked up for a crime you've committed, or you could even look at the criminals themselves who are not contributing to society when they decide to commit crimes, whether it's robbery, assault, murder, rape, whatever it is. So I think, I mean, I can go on the list, but I think you can kind of figure out that there are either bad people out there or people, like I mentioned even earlier, that either physically can. And I know these are exceptions, but even if you don't have a physical or mental disability, I think there are people out there who are either super lazy, are bad people and committing crimes. So that's what I would kind of point towards for people who are negatives for society.
Okay, so a couple things. First of all, the people who are like lazy or committing crimes and therefore not contributing to society. But we would morally condemn that, right? We would say if you're not doing anything with your life, if you're not helping anyone, that's probably wrong. And there's also such thing as one thing that I'd like to talk about is social compulsion, right? So through the way that we talk to each other, we encourage each other to contribute to society. That's something that we have in our culture, and I think that's a good thing. But also legally, obviously, if people who commit crimes, but if you're not doing anything at all in your life, including not having a job whatsoever, then as a society, I mean, we don't come into your house and force you to work, but we're also going to probably like not give you a lot of the societal advantages because a lot of those societal advantages are conditional on your contributions. So if you don't have a job, you don't have the ability to have any independence in our world. You don't have the ability. A lot of times, you don't have health insurance, stuff like that, and a lot of the help that we give to people is conditional based on the work that you do for society, and that's probably a good thing, right?
Wouldn't you, to kind of counteract that, wouldn't you argue, let's say, um, and there are programs like this where you have somebody who's in jail, not even necessarily for murder, but somebody who's a criminal, and then you force them to go out in society, and then they commit a crime again, or they steal from their place of work again. Wouldn't you say that's harmful that you have forced them to go back out and find a job or work if they're not necessarily ready to be reintegrated to society, or they're in a negative to society, and we know that already? So I feel like if you're forcing people to do things and work in this instance, you can create bad or even worse outcomes depending on the type of person they are. So I think when you force people to do things that they don't like, they might even sabotage the people that they're doing it for, the people that hired them, or whatever it may be. So I don't always think it's a good thing to force people to do things. Like we always do things out of spite. I think that's human nature to do things out of spite as well. Even if you're not a criminal, I've done things out of spite in my life. So forcing people, I just feel like mentally never has great outcomes 100%. I'm sure there are instances that it's the opposite, but I think when you apply this to all of society, it's not a net benefit.
So, but we can look at that scenario as like maybe not a moral good, but like a lesser of two evils. So if we say someone is incapable of going into society without creating harm, then we'll put them in jail and have them be a sink on our society as not a moral good, but a lesser of two evils. And that person going back into society and saying, "Oh, you want me to get a job? Well, fuck you." I can swear, right? Okay. Fuck you. I'm gonna go commit more crimes. We're not like, oh, fair enough. We would still morally condemn that, right? To say that someone like is like okay to not contribute to society, and that's a moral that's a moral acceptance that we would give. I don't really think that applies to anyone, right? And also, I have another point. Sorry. Uh, on the people who are lazy, we also have other kind of workarounds, which is that if you don't like have a job and you're like say living at home doing nothing, then the way that we make up for that is by putting more pressure on your caregiver to contribute to society. Say you live with your mother, right? Well, if you're not going to contribute to society, we're going to put more burden on her to contribute even more to society by making her work more and therefore pay more taxes.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of what we were doing today. But then how do you decide whether somebody has contributed even enough, right? I think to flip it back is that, let's say you have somebody and you're forcing people to contribute to society. Who's deciding that? Is it you? Is it the state? Is it a private entity and some algorithm out there? The majority of people, are we voting on this? So I think that's kind of another slippery slope where you are forcing people to contribute, and then those contribute contributions may not be enough to whoever is deciding this. So who's in charge matters as well in this case. And I would kind of ask, like, how do you decide who is the the ruler, and how is that not like kind of a slippery slope where if I'm doing a lot more, I think I'm doing a lot more than somebody else. How come that's not contributing to society, and then somebody else doing less is not? How do we have that debate from there?
Well, I mean, we can have those debates, but like having that question doesn't really disprove the concept of that we should contribute to society. And based on different cultural standards, we usually set laws and different social norms to establish these. So I believe we do this through taxes, and we can come together as society and decide where we want to draw that line. How high should taxes be, and how much should we pressure people to work in order to contribute those taxes? And we can have those discussions, and it seems to be going pretty well in America. I mean, we can't make that absolute. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions, but that doesn't. Again, exceptions don't break the rule that you should be in some way compelled to contribute to society.
But then I guess how do you decide then at one point how do you decide when someone refuses to contribute to society what they do, right? You say that we impose taxes, you can go back to prison, you can be arrested if you do something wrong, or we accept these things, but isn't that just what we already do today, right? If you aren't forcing people and you're enacting punishments on people who don't contribute to society, then I guess like what's the alternative to your point here? Because it sounds like it's just what we are having in society today, unless that isn't your point.
Well, my position is that in American law, there are compulsions to contribute to society, and I feel like those, and in most Western cultures, that is the case. And I feel as though those laws are good and should be in place. And although they don't, like, we can talk about pragmatic issues with forcing everyone to comply. It might not be worth it if we say anyone who doesn't contribute a certain standard, we're going to storm into the house and throw them into jail. Again, that might have pragmatic issues, so we don't approach it that way, but we do approach it in certain ways, like if you don't have a job that makes this much money and pays this much in taxes, then we are going to put holds on you. If you don't pay your taxes, you're going to go to jail. If you don't have a job to pay taxes, then you're not going to get any resources to be able to live your life, things like that.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of what I said earlier, where it's like there are benefits to contributing to society, but it is impossible to compel or obligate people, right? In this instance, if you can't obligate or compel them, you throw them in jail, you tax them, whatever. But for the prompt itself, if you obligate or compel them, you have to force them to do a job, right?
Well, is enforcing taxes a form of compulsion?
Tax, yeah, yeah, it is.
Exactly. So
But
we
like,
do
but
enforce
that's
these
not,
things.
but that's not the person contributing to society, right?
Yeah, it
You're
is.
saying so you're
Absolutely, it
saying
is.
if they pay, it's contributing to society, but not necessarily working is contributing to society. So they don't have to do anything; they
Uh,
just have to pay taxes.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any kind of contribution. I mean, again, like I said, the societal standards can establish where they want to draw that line. And I'm not saying that one of the points you made in your opening is like, well, if we value the contributions of society, people are broken down to their resources they can give to society. Not necessarily. I'm not saying that you have to make every aspect of your life about contributing maximally, but there should be some level of compulsion to contribute to society. And if you're like you mentioned streamers, I know this is a joke, but like technically, if you're a streamer and you're making bringing in good donations, Twitch does tax you, right? Some of that money does go to the government, and objectively, that means that you are contributing to society.
Yeah, and it was just a joke. I didn't actually mean that, but I
Yeah,
think that when
but
you
but I
talk,
think it's a good example of like how all different types of people can contribute in different ways, and
I agree. I
also
agree
there's
about
like
different ways. I
yeah.
think the uniqueness isn't the issue here. But then I'm just thinking we have people who I would argue don't do anything and they still pay taxes. Obviously, they don't want to disobey the law. But I don't know how that's beneficial to society if you had just a country or a load of people just sitting around paying taxes, but not really building anything or growing anything or making society better. They're kind of just there. So is that still beneficial if people if they're not committing crimes and they're just paying taxes, but they're just kind of sitting around, whatever it is. I guess you can make money off the government. In that case, if you're unemployed, you can get unemployment. and you can pay tax on that, I guess. But like, is that really beneficial, or do you actually want people to go out and build things and be resourceful on their own, grow up on their own without anybody as a dependent for them? So I think that's where my issue is. Like, if this is just about paying taxes and not committing crimes, I guess that's something, but I don't see that as just totally beneficial as, actually going out and doing something in the world.
Well, that goes into the pragmatic issue of what level of contribution do we ask for? And
Right.
I think I gave the answer. We don't have to have massive contributions from everyone. Yeah, it is important to have some people who can build our roads with their hands, but we don't need to make every single citizen an employee of the government. We don't need to have every single person, doing these specific jobs that build infrastructure. And yes, paying taxes is a part of contributing. If someone just pays taxes, objectively speaking, that is a form of contribution, right? Because I, it feels like you're implying that it does nothing, but it absolutely doesn't, right? We need to pay for these roads. We need to pay for our military. We need to pay our cops so that they can live lives, so that we can actually get people to want to do jobs like teaching, like police, like construction. All these things, they need tax money, and if you're refusing to do anything for society, then we don't have the foundations for building the society that we have.
All right. I mean, I kind of addressed this a little when I said that we can do that without everybody being obligated. But my follow up to that is like, when we are born or as citizens, when do we even consent to uh, being, contributing to society? Is this at birth? Is this by being an American? Is this implied? Can it be withdrawn? Do I have to consent? Do I have to, can I opt out without a penalty? I think that's important, is like, when is that bestowed upon me? Where are you telling a baby they have to, be contributive to society? Is it when I'm 10 years old? Is it when I'm 16 years old? How do you determine when I'm able bodied?
Well, we generally agree that that minors and children don't really have any rights. So yeah, you don't get the right to not to redact consent for living in society. Although when you get an adult, you technically can withdraw consent, because if you don't consent to living in society, the only solution is running away and living completely independently in the woods. Somewhere where there is absolutely no society there. You can technically do that if you want. If you want to withdraw consent, but nobody wants to. Everyone still wants to live in society, right? And if you are living in society and taking up in its resources and taking in its advantages, then that is a part of the social contract. We give you these things with the intention that you will in turn contribute, right? And if you refuse to do that, then you are breaking the social contract, or in a lot of ways, is a contract rather.
Do you believe that the only method of compulsion is taxes?
No,
Okay. And
obviously.
then, yeah, I did. But for both of you, could you do me a favor, Hammer, with 1 minute on the clock? Would you define contribution in this context? Like, what levels and types of contribution are you arguing in favor of? Go ahead.
I get so I guess I kind of got into this during the debate, but like we can, as a society, judge what level of contribution should be compelled, right? Any contribution that actively works towards the things that we have in society. So if you pay taxes, those taxes pay for infrastructure. These are the benefits that I'm talking about, and anything that actively goes towards uh, increasing the ability for the things that we have in society to be built, that is a contribution. Anything is a contribution as long as it actually contributes to these things.
All right. Same question goes to you, Castle. Within the context of this debate, how do you intend the word contribution to be used?
Yeah, so I think, like my opponent said, like, if you are just thinking about it as taxes, it seems like that is the only way. But when he asked if it was just taxes, he said no. For me, I think contributions would have to be being able-bodied to work in society, to build, grow, pay for things on your own, and be independent. I think independence is a big thing, for me, at least, in defining contributions here. So being able to hold down a job, support a family, provide for them, living on your own outside of any dependency, and helping the country grow and build in a positive manner, and not being a net negative. That's how I would define it.
All right. Good stuff.
Can I can I make a quick clarification?
Sure.
Um, Okay, so my answer is that taxes isn't the only form of contribution, but it can be the only form of contribution that an individual person can give. That is acceptable to me. That's my.
If free will, individual choice drives society to prosper and not the ruling structure, are people still socially compelled to one another in society and thus good for that ruling structure to step in and force that to happen? Go ahead, and if you can wade through that, Hammer, go ahead and start.
Okay, I'm gonna try to get this in within a minute. Okay, so my philosophy is liberalism, which is not true, like complete, what I call liberalism, which is not true absolute libertarianism of do whatever you want. It's you can pursue what you want and have freedom in society with limits. So yeah, free will and freedom do contribute to what we love in America, but only to an extent and only with limitations. If society was built on a bunch of people doing what they want and all they wanted to do was be completely selfish and contribute to nobody else, we wouldn't have a great society. We have free will to pursue the things that we want with the expectation that to some extent that will include some contributions to society.
Go ahead.
Yes, I think in short, I would say yes. People, I would argue we still have free will in society today. And then when people act out of line, um, we've set up societal structures to tell us what is good and not good, and then in turn arrest people or put people in jail for doing bad things. So I don't want to answer this wrong or take this question the wrong way. If I'm not, then I apologize. But I think yes, plainly, it would just be that. Yeah.
Hammer, you first. Do you believe that people should be able to replace paying taxes with community service? Instead,
Potentially, if they can come up
you get the question. Okay, good. Sorry.
potentially, potentially.
Okay, same question to you, Castle. Do you think people should be able to replace their tax paying with community service offering?
I do not. I think that when you think of the two, community service is great, and I'm not against it, but I think that is more voluntary. Paying taxes is obligatory for, I think, our country to kind of survive on what we buy. We buy a lot of stuff, so we need to pay for it somehow. So no.
Okay, my closing statements are that I think that I don't want to. I feel like a lot of people when they hear contributions, they assume a lot, and when they hear the idea that contributions should be obligatory, they always worry about authoritarianism. I think that we can still have a free society while still having some level of ask of their citizens. We need people to actually contribute to society, and I don't think that asking people or making them contribute to society removes the good that they do. Right? We need these things. We can't. This isn't really a negotiation. If we have a society in which people are refusing to do anything for the people around them, then we won't have anything. We won't. Everything will fall apart, and we will start to feel that drain, right? And I think it's totally okay for us as like the government is a representation of the people. I know people don't like to agree with me or whatever, but it does follow in a lot of ways the will of the people. And so for the will of the people to come to each and every of the collective to each and every person within that group and say, hey, we're all contributing, you need to chip in as well. I think that is totally acceptable, and I think that is important and necessary in order to have all the things that we have in society. And I cede my time.
Cool. So I think my opponent made a lot of great points about why it's beneficial to contribute to society, but the difference between there's a simple distinction, and that's the difference between encouragement and coercion. And I think my opponent said that because we all benefit from society, we're therefore ethically obligated to contribute, and that those who disagree may be lying. But I think ethics doesn't work that way, and there's some ethical responsibility that requires moral agency. So people benefit from living in society, but the benefit alone does not create an enforceable obligation. I think it's great for people to go out and contribute, but none of us explicitly have consented to some social construct, and the existence itself cannot reasonably be treated as a debt. So if it were, citizenship would become a permanent liability rather than a protected status. So I just think that it kind of leads down to a rough road strong societies don't force people to contribute. I think we all like having free will and living in our country today. And there are some things that we are forced to do, but making everybody and making contributions obligatory and compelled, they create these conditions where people have to force to do something they may not like. They may be in a mental state where they are not in a good place to do so. They can do things that are bad and negative that harm people in this case. And so we need to respect individuals themselves and not use them as instruments for any type of social output, because I think that's just bad for society. So contribution should be encouraged, rewarded, celebrated, but never compelled, because the moment obligation replaces that choice, our citizen turns into servitude, and then society loses the very freedoms it claims to protect. And I'll end it there.